Evil Twin Skippy, everybody's favorite maker, for the purpose of this video. Tonight, we're going to take a break from coffee cups. And if we open up my handy-dandy curing oven, you'll see tonight's main attraction. We are going to be making a punch bowl. This was so awesome when I saw it. This is from IK3D, and I just went on their Patreon. I'm like, take my money, take my money. This is basically the xenomorph pod from Alien, and I figured out that if I print it with enough walls, this is about half a kilo, this would make a really excellent either candy dish or punch bowl. This is for an Etsy client, and they wanted to use it outdoors, so this is an ASA rather than my usual ABS. Also, partly because this army green is really only available in ASA. So you'll notice that we're kind of flipped horizontal for this video because this is going to be a long-form video for YouTube instead of my usual shorts. But I'm also going to, rather than fast forward, walk you through the entire process as I do this, because I haven't done a macroscopic object on my channel yet. So give me a minute to glove up and mask up, and we'll tune right back in. We've got a luxury of time because this is going to be a long-form YouTube video. So I'm going to go a little more in-depth into the background. Now, I've done my tutorial videos, but that was done months ago, and honestly, I learn so much every time I go to do this. Now, this is actually a food dehydrator. My wife and I have just turned this over to doing our various resin crafts. She does poured resin, and I do the 3D prints. Now, for the microwave safe stuff, I have to dry it out because any moisture that's trapped inside is going to basically explode at some point when somebody microwaves, especially if they leave it in there for a little extra long, and ask me how I know. So this print, to make it not warp, I have to glue it down, which also means that when it comes off, I have to wash off all the glue, and that would leave water stuck on the bottom. So this is just my kind of pre-game. I warm it up. Now the warming up also makes the resin stick better, and it also makes the resin flow better. So it is a kind of a win-win. I also you'll see when I go to coat this, once it's coated, I will put the whole thing back in the oven and then let the resin just run off because it's going to be super fluid, and that helps avoid all the giant drips on the bottom that I'm going to have to like Dremel off when it's all done. All right, let's get my gloves on and masks on, and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so some other things that we use. This is, you'll see that I'm putting my my prints down on this. This is actually parchment paper, like you get at the supermarket. The neat thing is that resin basically doesn't stick to it. So if you don't mind the matte finish on the bottom, that stuff is great. Your other alternative is a silicone mat. But what I run into is with the silicone mat, all these little globules stick, and so your next print ends up picking up the leftovers from the previous one. And when the parchment paper's done, you just bundle it up and you throw it away. Gloves, obviously. You don't want this stuff all over your hands, unless that's your thing. I don't judge, but yeah, no. Respirator, non-negotiable. If you're working outside and you got some decent ventilation, you probably get away without it, but I'm not. So if you try to leather lung it, you're going to regret it in the morning because this just basically makes all of your sinuses get super flared up. and you're just not going to have a pleasant time, even from the fumes. Now, some people develop a super allergic reaction to it. So again, don't expose yourself as much as you can, and you'll avoid this reaction that a lot of makers have had with the fumes from resin. Now here you'll see I have this wonderful collection of brushes that are all frozen stiff. This is a food-safe process, and what I do is I use a fresh brush every time. I just get the cheapest brushes I can from Micro Center or Walmart or Home Depot, and the reason why you have to use a fresh brush every time is that, yeah, it's perfectly possible to clean this brush, but anything that you're going to use to pull the resin out of this brush is going to be something super nasty that you do not want smeared all over something that somebody's going to eat or drink off of. So it's just cost of doing business. Now you'll also see me spraying with this. This is pure ethanol, or at least as pure an ethanol as I can get at the state store. The nice thing is that this will either dilute or thin the resin. It evaporates right out of it when I expose it to heat, and it makes great for spot cleanup because it will dissolve the resin that hasn't cured yet. So if I need to clean something up, this is just fantastic. I also keep alcohol wipes around for the same reason. They're just great at picking up little drips and drabs from the resin before it cures. All right, so we've gotten through the boring stuff. Let me put my mask on, and we'll get to the exciting stuff.
These are fun little things that I just came up with one day. It is just a ABS print, but the idea is that I can put something that's dripping with resin on it, and it will trap the resin and actually allow me to brush up the resin that's filled this void. This is also robust enough to go in and out of the oven at temperature, so it allows me to basically let all the excess resin drain off of a piece before I set it up for final curing. And if you don't do that, you got to be like real meticulous about how much resin you're putting on. And then even when you're not, you've got these lava bubbles at the bottom, which aren't ideal. So you'll see me using these. You know, I should probably post the models to printables. I've gone through a couple different variations of it. I'm not super happy with them, but you know, I just keep developing. I keep innovating. These pumps are a lifesaver because if you've never tried to pour resin while you're gummed up and gooey, and with this process, I'm constantly having to top off because I can only put so much on at a time, and there's only about a 45-minute work time before this resin really gets sticky. So I got these from Let's Resin. Again, having a wife who does poured acrylic, super useful. And this is a two-parter. It's 2 to 1. So I do a pump of 2 pumps of the big one and 1 pump of the little one. And then it's just mix, 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 mix. Now, I've been finding that just giving myself about 8 spritz of the ethanol just makes for a more consistent coating for what we're doing here. It just thins it out a little bit and helps draw the bubbles. The alcohol evaporates right out along with whatever the solvent in the resin is. So, and it's stuff that you could drink anyway. So it's not a chemical risk. So we mix it up. I know it's about ready when it goes from cloudy back to clear again. Not that you can see that on the camera. And basically I've been reusing the same cup forever, so it's like absolutely caked in resin. At some point I should probably just do shots out of it. So here we go. I got everything mixed up. We'll put the bottles in the back of the table here. And our first pass, we're just going to do like a tumbly. This is just great for making sure that we absolutely thoroughly coat the inside. So I'm just going to take it and go around and not worry that I've got a ton of excess in there, because I'm just going to pour it right back out. Now I got my fresh brush. Where it doesn't want to flow, I just go in and just give it a little mop. And because this thing is so hot, it's like bread right out of the oven right now. This resin is like liquid. Well, I mean, it was liquid, but it's flowing like water right now. Now, that will also mean it's going to cure that much faster. So, time is not your friend. Okay. And now we're going to pour out the worst of it. Well, the other fun thing is that you can work with the puddle of stuff that's at the bottom to coat the rest. So, now I keep one of those ring lights right here, and I use that even when I'm not filming, because it is fantastic for telling what areas of the print I've hit, because they reflect really well. And I err on the side of sloppy when it comes to applying this resin. You know, normally with painting, you're like, oh, don't put on too much, but this you really want to put on too much. And then what I do is, like I said, I put it in the oven, and I let it bake for about 5 or 10 minutes. And anything that's going to run off does. And then I can clean that up, and whatever's left is pretty much stuck onto the print. So that's going to make a great coating. Now this one's got a lot of detail up top, more so than my usual mugs. So I got to go in there and make sure I get absolutely everything. And when in doubt, too much is almost not enough. I got a puddle of this stuff that's forming at the bottom. And so I'm using that to be able to just brush this on, brush this on, brush this on. Now, extra resin that coats, that sticks to the bottom here is fine, because all that's going to do is just solidify the bottom even more. And it probably soaks into the infill in between the base and the bottom of the serving fixture. Now, for thoroughness, I like to find a pattern and make sure that I hit everything mechanically before I move on, because while, you know, you can see a lot of stuff visually, being systematic means that you catch a lot of stuff that you would have missed just going by visuals. Now, this print's probably too big for me to turn. Alright, so what you'll see me do a lot on my mugs is that I will paint it in one direction, then flip it over. And what that allows the resin to do is to drip in areas where it wouldn't have otherwise, if it was only held straight up or straight down. Now for this one, I'm painting it in the up position, but when I'm done, I'm going to flip it over. Actually, let me just do that. Do I have... There we go. Now, the nice thing about these trays is because they're not very porous at this point, because they're coated with resin, any resin that drips off is super easy to just brush back onto something. But you can also use your brush as a sponge. Now, here is a problem that you're going to see a lot. I have pulled some resin off the bottom. Some of your filaments, or some of the colorants in the filaments, dissolve in this resin. So if you're doing a whole batch of stuff, try to make it all the same color, because sometimes you might ruin your evening, or at least you might ruin a whole bunch of prints. Like the red is particularly awful at this, that I do my Pokeball mugs in. So here, I'm using the brush as a sponge to get everything off the bottom, and then you could just wring it out on the side of the cup. And I'm going to flip this over for a few minutes to do the bottom. And yeah, you're going to waste some of the resin. It's just a cost of doing business. You've got so little time to work with this stuff. That it's just, the whole idea is to just get it on quickly. Working from a heated piece is great because it just helps everything flow that much easier. And working from two different angles means that whatever drips when I'm painting it either right side up or upside down is going to get into all the cracks and crevices of the other direction. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to have to just use all of this resin up on this one because it's gotten encased, with the color, and I don't want that on any of my other prints. Okay. And we're going on there. I'm making sure that everything on the top side is done, because it dripping down is fine. I just don't want to run out of goop. And once I've got everything on one level, I'll just continue to move it. Now, on my first pass, I will paint with the layer lines because it's just easier to apply. But once I'm sure I've got a decent coverage, I will actually go against the layer lines, and that helps keep the finish consistent. I'm not 100% sure that's actually doing anything, because I've also had prints where I've just painted with the layer lines, and they just kind of work out in the end because everything just kind of settles down between my heating and curing. All right. I'm just going to go and just walk this through. Make sure that we have covered absolutely everything. You can go back and reapply if you find you missed a spot, but I find that it just never looks the same. So my strategy is just go in there and be messy once. Get absolutely everything. And also, don't neglect these little tentacles at the bottom. So I mixed up about 30 mil, and I think I have about 10 mil sitting at the bottom of my cup. So even a giant half-kilo print here doesn't require all that much resin. It's a fraction of surface area. So something that weighs probably 4 times as much as a standard cup only needs about twice as much resin. But it required 12 hours to print. So, all right. And again, use the light and look for where you don't see stuff reflecting. If you get a hair, that's what these alcohol wipes are great for. Pick it out with your finger, and then wipe your finger off on the alcohol wipe. All right. I'm sure I got absolutely everything. And then check down here. All right. Don't worry about getting fingerprints, because this stuff is so fluid. After it's had a chance to flow and cure, you're not going to have any. Now, once this stuff starts setting, yeah, you don't want to touch it. But for this point, where everything is like liquid and gooey, it's great. So I am fairly convinced that I have gotten everything. I say that. There's a little bit more. Alright, and then check on the inside. Don't worry about getting the stuff on your gloved hands. You're just gonna. Sometimes you even find that the piece works best by just wiping it with your gloved hands. Now, it's thickened up a little bit in just the time we've talked. So I'm just going to take any of the excess and I'm going to allow it to flow back into the bottom of this thing so that we get a nice thick coating. And then any of the resin that's come off onto this plate, just dab up. And again, I'm just using the brush like a sponge. And if you rub it up against something, it's a great way to wring it out. But always check that you didn't leave any hairs behind. Alright. That is something to be proud of. Alright. And then my final trick is to help cut down on bubbles. I give this thing a spritz of the alcohol spray. And that helps break the surface tension on the resin. Now I'm going to put this on this stand here. And we're going to let it bake for about 5 minutes. And I'll come back and let you know how it goes.
Now, for this part of the process, we are essentially just warming this up to about 50 C, 140 Fahrenheit, 149 Fahrenheit. And that is still below the temperature by which the ABS is going to soften. That usually softens around 95 C. If you heat it up all the way to like 100 C, you will get a annealing effect, but you also get some warping. What I'm essentially doing is allowing all that excess resin that I've painted on here to drip down into this pan. And this pan has just lots of little knobs, and those little knobs just keep the print from sticking too badly. And if I felt brave enough, I could go in there with a brush and mop up all that excess and use it on my next mug. Now this one is pretty big. I'm going to leave it for a few minutes. I do check it to make sure there's no bubbles or anything like that. This is coming out pretty good. We've got a nice thorough coating on the bottom, and what we're going to see in over time is that the resin on the inside is going to slough down to the bottom, and this is going to thicken up that bottom layer. All right, I have another one that is currently printing on my bamboo. You can see it's just a regular bamboo X1. You can see I do print this with a lot of walls because I want this thing to be solid. I'm going to 3D Printopia this weekend, and as the unofficial arranger of the tailgating, I'm like, it would be totally awesome to have a punch bowl that we can use for drinks. So this is also in progress, and hey, if you want to pick one of these up, you know where to see me. And yeah, you can run this off on your home printer if you're crazy and you don't mind the fumes. All right, it's been a few minutes. Essentially, everything that's going to drip is going to drip. So we'll pop this puppy out. If we look inside, it is smooth as butter. Mostly what I'm looking for right now is if I pick this up, I'm trying to get all this excess resin off the bottom. And I just use my my brush to just sponge it up and wring it out. And I would normally be doing a bunch of mugs in parallel with this, but as you saw, given that this thing bleeds into the resin, not many opportunities for that tonight. The final step is I grab a reasonably clean sheet of parchment and I just put it back in the oven and let it cure overnight. At an elevated temperature, this thing is supposed to normally cure over about 24 hours. But at 150 or 160 or 170 Fahrenheit, these things are usually ready to ship the next day. Obviously, it has a few days in the mail to cure. If I'm going for a show, I will put a little wrapper around the stuff that I have just resined with a don't use before day. So I hope this was fun, and I'll catch you in my next video.